Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're zooming in on something absolutely magnificent, the sheer massive scale of India's ecological conservation. We're going to look closely at the numbers that map out the country's incredible protected green spaces. So, if you're the kind of person who loves seeing exactly how a nation protects its natural treasures, well, you're in exactly the right place. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at India's protected green spaces overall. Second, we'll break down parks versus sanctuaries. Third, we're hitting the record holders. And finally, we'll wrap up with a state-by-state breakdown. Right, Section 1, India's protected green spaces. We're looking at the overarching scale of conservation here, and honestly, the numbers are pretty mind-blowing. 103. Right now, spread across the immense length and breadth of the country, India has exactly 103 officially recognized national parks. Every single one of these is a dedicated haven specifically meant to preserve the nation's rich biodiversity. From the freezing, snow-clad forest of the Himalayas all the way down to the lush, tropical rainforests of the south, these 103 parks literally represent the absolute highest level of ecological preservation in the entire country. But as impressive as 103 is, this next figure is even more staggering, 544. That represents the total count of wildlife sanctuaries in India. So when you put those together, we're talking about nearly 650 fiercely protected zones declared by the government. And all of them share this primary objective, safeguarding flora and fauna and restoring the natural ecological balance. It's a massive, beautiful undertaking, and it draws millions of tourists every single year. Section 2. Parks versus sanctuaries, defining the legal and ecological boundaries. Let's move to and see how this builds, because while they might sound kind of interchangeable in casual conversation, under the law, they're actually completely different beasts. So what exactly is a national park? Well, legally speaking, it's an area strictly reserved for the betterment of wildlife and biodiversity. Size-wise, they're usually relatively small reserves, typically spreading anywhere from 100 to 500 square kilometers. The government steps in and declares an area a national park when it holds adequate ecological, geomorphological, and natural significance. And here's the key takeaway. The emphasis in a national park is usually heavily focused on preserving just a single floral or fauna species. Think of it like a highly specialized, heavily guarded fortress for nature. And when I say heavily guarded, I mean that literally. Inside a national park, absolutely zero developmental activities are permitted. Forestry, hunting, completely banned. There's no poaching, no cultivation, and no grazing allowed whatsoever. You can't even have private ownership rights inside the park. The whole shebang is totally locked down with well-marked and circumscribed boundaries to ensure absolutely no human interference. Now let's flip the coin and look at a wildlife sanctuary. This is an area demarcated for the protection of a particular species of flora and fauna, but it comes with one major distinction. Limited human activities may actually be allowed here. Now, don't get me wrong, any exploitation of the wildlife is absolutely a strictly punishable offense, and trying to take any forest produce requires some pretty serious special recommendations from wildlife boards. But the rigid zero-tolerance restrictions we just talked about with national parks, they're notably different in sanctuaries. So the crucial point is really captured right here. National parks, strictly no human activity, no private ownership, and absolutely zero commercial grazing. Wildlife sanctuaries, on the other hand, allow for this localized community flexibility. State authorities might actually permit limited activities, like, say, allowing local communities to graze their livestock. It's this incredibly delicate balance between fiercely protecting nature and accommodating the folks who've lived alongside these ecosystems for generations. All right, moving into Section 3, the record holders. We're exploring the extremes of India's geography, turning all this data into some pretty fun trivia. Let's see how well you know your Indian geography. Okay, here's a question for you. Out of those 103 parks we mentioned earlier, which one is the absolute largest national park in India? Go ahead, take a quick mental guess. You think it's hidden out in the deserts of Rajasthan? Or maybe it's tucked deep in the forests of Madhya Pradesh? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the actual answer. Hemis National Park, located way up in Jammu and Kashmir. It stretches over an absolutely massive 4,400 square kilometers. Just try to wrap your head around that scale for a second. It's a vast, high-altitude sanctuary that easily holds the undisputed record for the largest geographical footprint of any park in the entire nation. Okay, so we've got the biggest. What about the smallest national park? If Hemis is this sprawling giant of the north, where in the world is its tiny little counterpart hiding? Well, the answer actually takes us about as far away from those freezing northern heights as physically possible. The smallest is South Button Island National Park, located all the way out in the tropical Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It's such a striking contrast, right? It brilliantly showcases just how wildly diverse India's protected ecosystems truly are, stretching from freezing mountain altitudes all the way down to warm, deep ocean islands. And hey, what about those 544 wildlife sanctuaries? Just to knock these out side by side so they stick in your memory, the largest sanctuary in India is the sprawling Rann of Kutch over in Gujarat. Meanwhile, the title for the smallest, that goes to the Boar Tiger Reserve, nestled right down in Maharashtra. And that brings us to Section 4, State-by-State Breakdown. Let's find out exactly which regions host the densest concentrations of these green spaces. So if you're a massive fan of national parks, you've got two primary destinations to add to your bucket list right away. Out of all the states and union territories, Madhya Pradesh and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are completely tied for the absolute maximum number of national parks. They boast exactly 9 each. Now, thanks to India's wild biodiversity, you can find at least one national park in almost every state. But think about this. Nearly 20% of all of India's national parks are concentrated in just these 2 regions alone. And this brilliantly illustrates a really incredible quirk in the data when we look at wildlife sanctuaries. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands don't just tie for parks. They absolutely undeniably dominate when it comes to sanctuaries. They host a staggering 96 wildlife sanctuaries. To put that monumental number into perspective, the runner-up state is Maharashtra, coming in with 42. I mean, the island territory has literally more than double the number of the second-place state. So, here we are at our final thought. With roughly 647 protected areas, that's 103 parks and 544 sanctuaries, preserving India's ecology spanning from the massive 4,400 square kilometers of Hemis down to the tiny South Button Island. How much of this spectacular biodiversity have you actually explored? We've crunched the numbers and looked at the laws today, but the real magic is out there in the wild. I really hope this explainer inspires you to look beyond the data and experience these incredible conservation efforts firsthand. Keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.